My name is Rebecca, though everyone calls me Becca, and I am 34 years old. Being a single mom to my 12-year-old son Connor has been the hardest, yet most rewarding journey of my life. Despite my family constantly judging my choices, I still maintain contact with them. My sister Ashley is 7 months pregnant, and her baby shower is this weekend. I am hoping this gathering will finally give us a chance to heal old wounds. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family drama hits close to home. Growing up in the Patterson family meant living with sky-high expectations. My parents, especially my mother Linda, had a very specific idea of what success looked like: college education, respectable career, marriage to a suitable man, and then children, in that exact order. Anything that deviated from this path was considered failure. From the time we were little girls, Ashley and I were constantly compared. She was 2 years older, always the golden child, who seemed to effortlessly meet every expectation. Perfect grades, perfect friends, perfect extracurricular activities. I, on the other hand, was creative, emotional, and drawn to art rather than academics. My mother viewed my interests with barely concealed disappointment. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. While Ashley collected academic awards and praise, I collected criticisms and suggestions for improvement. Not that it was Ashley's fault. She was just naturally inclined toward the things our parents valued. By the time we reached adulthood, our paths had been firmly established. Ashley graduated from Northwestern University with honors, landed a prestigious job at a financial consulting firm, and met Brad Mitchell, a successful real estate developer from an equally impressive family. Their wedding was the social event of the year in our Charlotte community. I still remember my mother glowing with pride as she introduced herself as mother of the bride to everyone who would listen. My life took a different turn. I was in my 3rd year of art school when I met Tyler. He was charming, creative, and seemed to understand me in ways my family never did. When I discovered I was pregnant at 22, Tyler initially promised to stand by me. We talked about getting married, finishing school, and raising our child together. Those dreams evaporated when he disappeared 3 months later, leaving only a brief note explaining he wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility. When I told my family about the pregnancy, the reaction was exactly what I had expected. My father went silent. My mother cried as if I had died, and Ashley looked at me with a mixture of shock and superiority. "You're going to fix this situation, right?" my mother had asked, unable to even say the word abortion directly. When I made it clear I was keeping my baby, the disappointment in the house was palpable. My mother suggested I give the baby up for adoption. "You can still have a normal life," she insisted. "You can still find a good husband who won't hold this mistake against you." But Connor was never a mistake to me. From the moment I felt him kick, I knew I would do anything to give him a good life, with or without my family's support. I finished my degree online while pregnant, taking extra courses so I could graduate before Connor arrived. After he was born, I started working as a freelance graphic designer, taking on projects I could do from home while caring for my newborn. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, days I wondered if I had made the right choice, but I never regretted having my son. Over the years, I built a solid career and reputation. Now, I have a roster of loyal clients who appreciate my creativity and professionalism. We live in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment that I've turned into a warm, artistic home. Connor is thriving in school, especially in science and creative writing. He's a sensitive, thoughtful child with an uncanny ability to read people's emotions. My relationship with Connor is what I'm most proud of in life. We're a team. He knows the story of his father, appropriate for his age, of course, and while he sometimes asks questions, he has never seemed to feel incomplete without Tyler in his life. I've made sure to surround him with positive male role models, like my art mentor Marcus and my cousin Kevin, who often takes Connor camping. My relationship with my family, however, remains strained. I see them on major holidays and occasional family events, but these gatherings are usually tense. My mother still introduces me with subtle caveats. This is my younger daughter, Becca. She's quite the artist. The emphasis always seems to suggest that being an artist is somehow less than being whatever Ashley is at the moment. Speaking of Ashley, our relationship has grown more distant over the years. She climbed the corporate ladder quickly, eventually becoming a senior partner at her firm. Brad's real estate ventures flourished, and they moved into a sprawling home in an exclusive neighborhood in Myers Park. They traveled extensively, renovated their house twice, and generally lived the life my parents had always dreamed their daughters would have. The last time I saw them was at Thanksgiving about 6 months ago. That was when Ashley announced her pregnancy. Everyone was ecstatic. My mother cried tears of joy. My father opened an expensive bottle of champagne, and relatives called to congratulate them. In the midst of the celebration, I caught Brad staring at his phone with a strange expression. When he noticed me watching, he quickly pocketed the device and rejoined the conversation with forced enthusiasm. There was something off about Brad that day. He seemed distracted constantly, stepping outside to take calls. At one point, I overheard him speaking in hushed tones, saying, "I can't talk now. I'll call you tomorrow." When he came back inside, his smile seemed plastered on. I didn't think much of it at the time. Brad was a businessman after all. Calls were probably normal, even on holidays. But something about his demeanor stuck with me, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was finishing up a design project for a client. Seeing her name on my phone always sent a mixture of hope and dread through me. Hope that maybe this time would be different, dread that it probably wouldn't be. "Hello, Mother," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Becca," she replied, her voice already holding that slight edge of disapproval. "I'm calling about Ashley's baby shower this Saturday. It starts at 2 in the afternoon at her house. Not an invitation, exactly, more of an information delivery." "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "Connor and I will be there." A pause. "Oh, you're bringing Connor. I thought perhaps you could find someone to watch him. These events are really more for the women." "Connor is family," I replied firmly, "and he's looking forward to seeing everyone." My mother sighed, that familiar sound of resignation I'd heard so many times. "Well, if you must, please make sure he's appropriately dressed. And you too, of course. Ashley's friends from work will be there, and some of Brad's business associates' wives." Translation: "Don't embarrass us by looking like the struggling artist you are." "We'll be presentable, Mother," I assured her, already mentally cataloging my closet for something that would meet her standards. "Good. And please do try to arrive on time. The caterers are setting up at 1:30, so any time after that would be fine." Another pause, and then, "Becca, I do hope there won't be any issues. Ashley is in a delicate condition, and this is supposed to be a happy occasion for her." The implication was clear. Don't bring up anything uncomfortable. Don't talk about being a single mother. Don't remind everyone that you deviated from the plan. "I just want to celebrate with my sister," I said, which was true. Despite everything, I was genuinely happy for Ashley. "Good. Well, I'll see you Saturday then." After hanging up, I sat at my desk, feeling the familiar weight of my family's expectations. Part of me wanted to call back and make an excuse not to go. But another part, the stubborn part that still hoped for reconciliation, insisted I had to try one more time. That evening, I talked to Connor about the upcoming baby shower while we prepared dinner together. He was chopping vegetables with careful precision, a skill he'd recently developed and took great pride in. "So we're going to Aunt Ashley's baby party?" he asked, focused on creating perfectly even carrot slices. "Baby shower," I corrected gently. "And yes, we are. It's this Saturday afternoon." Connor was quiet for a moment. "Do we have to go? Grandma always looks at you funny, and Aunt Ashley barely talks to us." His observations stung because they were accurate. My 12-year-old son had picked up on exactly what happened at every family gathering. They're still our family, honey, and a new baby is something to celebrate. "Will Uncle Brad be there?" he asked, his voice changing slightly. "I expect so. It's his house and his baby, too." Connor moved on to the celery, his strokes becoming a bit more forceful. "I don't like how he looks at you." "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised by this comment. Connor shrugged. "He looks at you like you did something wrong, like you're less than them." I don't like it. I was struck by my son's perception. I'd noticed Brad's condescending attitude, of course, but I hadn't realized Connor had picked up on it too. "Sometimes people judge what they don't understand," I explained. "Uncle Brad has had a different life experience than we have. That doesn't make it okay." "That doesn't make it okay," Connor muttered. "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "But part of being the bigger person is showing up anyway. Being kind, and not letting other people's judgments define you." Connor didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "What are we getting for the baby?" I smiled, grateful for the change of subject. "I was thinking we could get a really nice, organic cotton baby blanket set. I found one handmade by that artisan we met at the farmer's market." "The one with the birds embroidered on it?" Connor asked, brightening a little. "That was pretty cool." "Yes, and it's expensive, so it should meet Grandma's standards for an appropriate gift," I added with a wink. Connor laughed, and the tension broke. "Can I make a card to go with it?" "Absolutely. Your artwork would make it extra special." The next few days passed quickly as I completed client projects and prepared for the baby shower. I spent more than I should have on the gift, wrapping it in elegant paper with a handmade card from Connor, featuring a beautifully drawn stork. I also splurged on a new dress for myself, navy blue, with subtle floral patterns, conservative enough for my mother's approval, but still reflective of my style. The morning of the shower, I noticed Connor was unusually quiet. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone with an intense expression. "Everything okay, buddy?" I asked, pouring him a glass of orange juice. He startled and quickly put his phone down. "Yeah, fine. You sure? You seem a bit distracted." "Just playing a game," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Later, as we were getting ready to leave, I caught him checking his phone again, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Connor, what's going on? You've been glued to that phone all morning." Nothing he said too quickly. Then, after a pause, "Mom, I don't think Uncle Brad is a good person." The statement was so unexpected that I didn't immediately know how to respond. "Why would you say that?" Connor hesitated, clearly wrestling with something. "Just a feeling I have." "Did something happen? Did he say something to you at Thanksgiving?" "No, nothing like that." "Can we just go? We're going to be late, and you know how Grandma gets." I wanted to press further, but he was right about the time. "Okay, but if something is bothering you, you can always talk to me about it. You know that, right?" He nodded, but his expression remained troubled. As we got in the car and headed toward Ashley and Brad's neighborhood, I couldn't shake the feeling that Connor was keeping something from me. I assumed it was just anxiety, about seeing family members who hadn't always been kind to us. I had no idea what was really going through my son's mind, or how it would change everything in just a few hours. Ashley and Brad's house sat on a hill overlooking the city, a contemporary masterpiece of glass and stone that had been featured in Charlotte Living magazine. As we pulled into the circular driveway, already lined with luxury vehicles, I felt the familiar pang of inadequacy in my practical Honda Civic. "Wow," Connor whispered beside me. "Their house is even bigger than I remembered." "They've done some renovations since Thanksgiving," I explained, recalling the detailed updates my mother had shared during our infrequent phone calls. "Uncle Brad's business has been very successful this year." We parked and approached the front door, Connor walking slightly behind me. I could sense his apprehension in the way he stayed close, almost using me as a shield. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. The door swung open to reveal not Ashley or Brad, but my mother, impeccably dressed in a pale pink skirt suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Becca Connor." "You're right on time," she said, giving me a quick once-over that I knew was an assessment of my appearance. Her slight nod told me I'd passed, if barely. "Most of the guests are already here. Come in." The foyer opened into a vast living area, where about 20 women were gathered in clusters, champagne flutes in hand. The room was decorated in soft pastels with elaborate flower arrangements, from petal and stem, and a table piled high with elegantly wrapped gifts. A banner reading, "Welcome Baby Mitchell," hung across the far wall. As we entered, several heads turned our way. I recognized a few of Ashley's friends from previous gatherings, some relatives, and several women I assumed were the business associates' wives my mother had mentioned. "There you are," Ashley called from her seat of honor, a plush armchair decorated with ribbons and flowers. My sister looked radiant in a fitted maternity dress that somehow managed to make pregnancy look glamorous. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her smile bright as she waved us over. Yet, as we approached, I noticed her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Becca, I'm glad you could make it," she said, accepting my brief hug. "And Connor, too. How nice." There was a slight inflection on nice that suggested it was anything but. Next to her, Brad stood in an expensive-looking suit, despite the casual nature of the event. He nodded at me stiffly, before turning his attention to Connor. "Hey there, young man. Getting tall, aren't you?" His tone was overly jovial, the kind adults use when they don't quite know how to talk to children. Connor merely nodded his eyes, darting between Brad and Ashley. "Why don't you both get something to eat?" my mother suggested, already steering us toward the buffet table and away from the center of attention. "The caterers have made the most wonderful selection." As we filled our plates with tiny finger sandwiches and fruit skewers, a woman I vaguely recognized as one of Ashley's college friends approached. "Becca Patterson," she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's been ages. Are you here alone today?" The question had an edge to it, a subtle dig that I was all too familiar with. "I'm here with my son," I replied evenly, gesturing to Connor, who was carefully selecting a cookie from a tiered tray. "Oh, how lovely," she said, her eyes conveying sympathy that felt more like pity. "It must be so challenging doing everything on your own." Before I could respond, an older woman who I recognized as my mother's cousin joined us. "This must be your boy," she said, looking at Connor with undisguised curiosity. "Growing up without a father figure must be so difficult. Boys, especially, need that male guidance, don't they?" Connor stiffened beside me, his knuckles whitening around his plate. "Connor has plenty of positive role models in his life," I said firmly, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. And he's doing exceptionally well, top of his class in science, and an amazing artist. Of course, the woman said dismissively. But it's not quite the same as having a father in the home, is it? I felt Connor trembling slightly under my touch and knew it was time to extract ourselves from this conversation. If you'll excuse us, I should go congratulate my sister properly. As we moved away, Connor whispered, I hate when they talk about me, like I'm not here, or like there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, I assured him. Some people just can't imagine happiness outside their narrow definition of what a family should look like. We found seats at the edge of the room, slightly removed from the main gathering. From there, we watched as Ashley held court, accepting compliments on everything from her pregnancy glow to her impeccable home. My mother fluttered around her like an anxious butterfly, ensuring everyone's glasses were full and conversations were flowing. When it came time for Ashley to open gifts, everyone gathered around her chair in a semicircle. We stayed toward the back, but my mother spotted us and waved impatiently. Becca, bring your gift up front. Ashley's about to start. Reluctantly, I moved forward with our carefully wrapped package, placing it on the gift table before retreating back to Connor. One by one, Ashley opened the presents, exclaiming over tiny outfits and baby gadgets I could never have afforded as a new mother. Each gift was met with genuine enthusiasm and effusive thanks. When she reached our gift, she unwrapped it quickly. Oh, a blanket set. How nice, she said, barely glancing at the exquisite handwork before setting it aside and reaching for the next package. No mention of Connor's beautiful card, no acknowledgement of the thought we'd put into selecting something handmade and special. That blanket cost $150. Connor muttered under his breath, and she acted like it was nothing. It's okay, I whispered back. The important thing is that the baby will have something cozy to snuggle in. But I felt the sting of dismissal too, especially when the next gift, a standard store-bought baby monitor, received far more appreciation. Connor's hand found mine and squeezed tightly, his intuitive nature sensing my hurt. When it came time for the lunch portion of the shower, we discovered that seating had been prearranged with delicate name cards. Connor and I were placed at a table in the far corner of the room, along with an elderly great-aunt who was hard of hearing and a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years. At least we can eat in peace, I whispered to Connor, trying to make the best of the situation. He offered a small smile in return, but I could tell he was aware of the deliberate separation. From our isolated position, we watched as my mother held court at the main table with Ashley Brad and what appeared to be the most prestigious guests. Linda's voice carried across the room as she regaled the table with stories of Ashley's accomplishments and the couple's perfectly stable life. Brad just closed that big development deal downtown, I overheard her saying. And they're already planning the nursery renovation. Only the best for my first grandchild. I winced at that. Connor was technically her first grandchild, though she rarely acknowledged him as such. Connor noticed too. I saw his shoulders slump slightly as he pushed food around his plate. Don't let it get to you, I said softly. You know Grandma has her own issues. I know, he replied. I just wish she could see how awesome you are, Mom. His loyalty warmed my heart. As long as you think so, that's all that matters to me. After lunch, the guests migrated back to the living room for coffee and dessert. Connor had grown increasingly quiet, checking his phone under the table, and occasionally casting strange glances toward Brad, who was working the room like a politician, moving from group to group with practiced charm. I tried to engage in conversation with a few of the less judgmental guests, mostly discussing neutral topics, like the unseasonably warm weather in the latest movies. Just as I was beginning to think we might make it through the event unscathed, the conversation took an unexpected turn. One of Ashley's friends, a woman named Valerie, who I remembered from their college days, raised her voice slightly to be heard over the general chatter. "So, Ashley, have you and Brad decided on your parenting approach? Are you going to be strict or more relaxed?" All eyes turned to my sister, who smiled serenely with one hand resting on her belly. "Well, we've been reading several books on the subject. Brad believes in firm boundaries with lots of positive reinforcement, and I think structure is so important for children." Heads nodded in agreement around the room. My mother beamed with pride. "We plan to be very involved parents." Ashley continued warming to her topic. "Brad is even cutting back on his work hours for the first few months. We believe having both parents actively engaged is crucial for proper development." As she spoke, her gaze drifted toward me, and something in her expression shifted a slight curl of her lip, a hardening around her eyes. "After all," she added, her voice taking on a pointed edge, "children need stability and consistency. A mother and a father who are committed to each other and to their family." The implication hung in the air like a heavy cloud. A few uncomfortable glances were cast in my direction. "We're so blessed," Ashley continued now, looking directly at me, "to be able to provide our child with everything they need, including a complete family unit." My stomach tightened as I realized where this was headed. Connor sensed it too, his body tensing beside me. "At least my baby will have a father," Ashley said, with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. To my horror, several guests actually chuckled along with her. Others looked away awkwardly, but no one spoke up. "Some women just make bad choices," my mother added, from her seat beside Ashley, her voice carrying in the now quieter room. But thankfully, Ashley has always known how to make the right decisions. The room seemed to spin around me. 12 years of judgment, 12 years of subtle and not so subtle digs, all distilled into this public humiliation. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here, not now, not in front of these people. I started to rise, intending to make a dignified exit, when Connor's hand on my arm stopped me. I looked down at my son, expecting to see hurt or embarrassment on his face. Instead, I saw something entirely different. His expression was calm, determined, with a maturity far beyond his 12 years. "Mom, it's okay," he whispered. "I need to do something." Before I could ask what he meant, Connor stood up, his slender frame straight and tall, beside me. The room gradually fell silent as people noticed the 12-year-old boy standing ramrod straight in the middle of the baby shower. Even Ashley's smug expression faltered slightly as she registered her nephew's stance. "Connor," I whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve. "Sit down, honey." But he gently shook off my hand, his eyes fixed on his aunt. The confidence in his bearing was so unexpected that I found myself frozen, uncertain whether to stop him or let whatever was happening unfold. My mother was the first to break the uncomfortable silence. "Connor, dear, the adults are talking. Why don't you go out to the patio? I think there might be some cookies left on the dessert table." Connor didn't even glance in her direction. Instead, he took one step forward, then another, until he was standing in the center of the room. The guests parted slightly, creating a clear line of sight between my son and Ashley and Brad. Aunt Ashley Connor said, his voice surprisingly steady and clear. "Should I tell everyone about Uncle Brad's other family?" The words landed like a bomb in the elegant room. For a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. Ashley's face went from confusion to shock, her mouth opening slightly, but no sound coming out. Brad, who had been casually leaning against the fireplace mantel, suddenly straightened his face, draining of color. My mother was frozen in place, one hand clutching her pearl necklace. The other guests exchanged bewildered glances, unsure if they had heard correctly. "What did he say?" someone whispered. "What is he talking about?" asked another. Brad was the first to recover, forcing a laugh that sounded painfully artificial. "Kids in their imaginations," he said, attempting to sound amused, but achieving only a strained approximation. "Connor, buddy, what are you talking about?" Connor didn't flinch under Brad's gaze. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I was at South Park Mall with my friend Zach last Saturday. We were at the food court when I saw you." Brad's face twitched slightly. "Well, I do go to that mall sometimes, for business." "What's so strange about that? You weren't alone." Connor continued, his voice, still calm, but now tinged with something like disappointment. "You were with a woman and 2 kids, a boy about my age, and a little girl, maybe 5 or 6. The room had gone so quiet, I could hear the tick of the ornate wall clock. Ashley's face was ashen now, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "You called the boy son," Connor added, "and the little girl called you daddy." Brad took a step forward, his forced smile now completely gone. "Now listen here. This is completely ridiculous. I have clients with children. I was probably just being friendly." Connor swiped his finger across his phone screen. "I took a picture because I was confused. I thought maybe you had cousins or something you never mentioned." He turned the phone around, showing a somewhat distant but clear image of Brad, with his arm around a woman who was definitely not Ashley, a boy and girl on either side of them. Brad's face contorted with anger. "You took pictures of me. That's an invasion of privacy. Becca, control your son." But it was too late. The photo was already being passed around as guests craned their necks to see. "After I saw you, I got curious." Connor continued, seemingly immune to Brad's growing fury. "So I looked you up online. It wasn't hard to find your other Facebook profile, the one under the name Bradley Harris instead of Brad Mitchell." Ashley made a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "You have a whole other life, 15 miles away, in Matthews," Connor said, his voice finally showing a crack of emotion. "Another wife named Diane, 2 kids, a dog named Cooper. You even posted pictures of your family vacation to Myrtle Beach last month, when you told Aunt Ashley you were at a business conference." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Several guests began gathering their purses, clearly eager to escape the unfolding drama. Others sat transfixed, unable to look away from the train wreck of a situation. "This is absurd," Brad sputtered, but his protest lacked conviction. "This child is making up stories." "I have the address too," Connor said quietly. 722 Oakwood Drive. That's where your other family lives, in the blue house with the red door. Brad's face crumpled, the final detail clearly confirming what everyone in the room now suspected was true. He opened his mouth as if to speak, closed it again, then turned to Ashley with pleading eyes. "Ashley, baby, I can explain. It's not what it sounds like." But Ashley was beyond hearing. She sat rigidly in her chair, one hand on her belly, the other covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. My mother had collapsed into a nearby chair, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. The perfect family she had held up as the gold standard for so long was disintegrating before her eyes. Connor finally turned away from Brad and looked at me, his young face showing both pride and uncertainty. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know you told me to be polite, but I couldn't let them keep being mean to you when Uncle Brad is the one living a lie." I reached for my son, pulling him close, overwhelmed by a mixture of shock at the revelation and fierce pride in his courage. "It's okay," I whispered into his hair. "You did nothing wrong." As the full impact of what had just happened began to sink in, I realized that our family would never be the same again. For better or worse, the truth was now out in the open, and none of us could go back to pretending everything was perfect. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Half the guests made hasty excuses and left clutching their handbags and whispering furiously as they hurried to their cars. The remaining guests hovered uncertainly, torn between the social awkwardness of staying and the juicy drama they didn't want to miss. Brad had gone from denial to anger to desperate pleading in the span of minutes. "Ashley, please let me explain," he begged, kneeling in front of her chair. "It's complicated. There are financial arrangements, custody issues. I was going to tell you eventually." Ashley stared at him with empty eyes, one hand protectively covering her belly. "How long?" she finally whispered. "How long have you been married to her?" Brad hesitated, which was answer enough. "Were you already married when you met me?" Ashley's voice rose sharply. His silence confirmed the worst. "Get out," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Get out of this house right now." "This is my house too," Brad protested, but the look on Ashley's face must have convinced him not to push the issue. He stood, straightened his jacket, and cast a venomous glance toward Connor and me. "This is your fault," he spat. "You and your nosy brat. You couldn't stand to see your sister happy, could you? Had to ruin it, because your own life is such a mess. That's enough." My mother's voice cut through the room with surprising force. She had risen from her chair and now stood between Brad and us, her small frame vibrating with fury. "You will not speak to my daughter or grandson that way. Not after what you've done. Leave this house immediately before I call the police." The authority in her voice was unexpected, and Brad's anger deflated slightly. With a final glare around the room, he grabbed his keys from a side table and stormed out the front door, slamming it behind him. In his wake, the remaining guests began to disperse, murmuring awkward condolences to Ashley as they left. Soon, only family remained. Ashley collapsed in her chair, my mother hovering nearby, and Connor and I standing uncertainly in the middle of the room. I turned to my son, needing to understand. "Connor, can we talk outside for a minute?" He nodded, following me onto the back patio, where the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. "How did you figure all this out?" I asked, once we were alone. Connor looked down at his sneakers. "It started at the mall, like I said. I saw Uncle Brad with that family, and he looked different. Happy, in a way I'd never seen before. They were eating ice cream and laughing, and he wasn't checking his phone or looking around nervously, like he always does when we see him at family stuff." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I took the picture because I was confused. Then I got curious and looked him up online. It wasn't that hard, Mom. He has 2 different Facebook accounts, but he uses the same profile picture, for both just cropped differently. One for Brad Mitchell, the successful businessman married to Aunt Ashley, and one for Bradley Harris, the family man with Diane and the kids." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked gently. Connor shrugged. "I was going to, but I wanted to be sure first. And then, When Aunt Ashley said those things about you and Grandma too, his voice trailed off, and he looked up at me with eyes too wise for his age. It made me so mad. They act like you did something wrong by raising me alone. But Uncle Brad is living a complete lie, and they think he's perfect. I pulled him into a hug, marveling at the compassionate, justice-minded person he was becoming. I'm not angry, I assured him, but revealing secrets like that is a big thing. There are consequences that affect a lot of people. I know, he said softly. But was I supposed to just let them keep hurting you? I had no good answer for that. Instead, I just held him tighter, grateful beyond words for his fierce loyalty. When we returned inside, we found Ashley alone in the living room, staring blankly at the Welcome Baby Mitchell banner that now seemed like a cruel joke. My mother had disappeared, presumably, to call my father or other relatives with the news. I approached my sister cautiously. Ashley, where is everyone? Gone, she said flatly. Mother is upstairs having a crisis of her own. Everyone else left. She looked up at me, her makeup streaked from crying. Are you happy now? The accusation stung. Of course not. How could you think that your son just destroyed my marriage? No, I said firmly. Brad destroyed your marriage when he decided to live a double life. Connor just exposed the truth. Ashley's face crumpled. 7 years, she whispered. I've been with him for 7 years, and it was all a lie. Despite everything that had transpired between us, my heart broke for her. I sat down beside her and tentatively placed a hand on her arm. I'm so sorry, Ashley. You didn't deserve this. What am I going to do? She asked, her hand moving to her rounded belly. I'm 7 months pregnant with his child. You're going to be okay, I told her, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. You're strong, successful, and you have family who will support you. A bitter laugh escaped her. Family? You mean the family I've treated terribly for years? The sister I just publicly humiliated. Why would you help me after everything I've said and done? I took a deep breath, because that's what family really means. Not appearances or status or following some predetermined path. It means being there for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Tears filled her eyes again. I've been horrible to you all this time. I thought I was so much better than you, because I had the perfect marriage, the perfect life, and it was all built on lies. We all make mistakes, I said softly. The question is what we do after we realize them. My mother reappeared, then her face drawn and aged somehow in the span of a single afternoon. She looked between Ashley and me with uncertainty, as if seeing us both for the first time. I called your father, she said to no one in particular. He's on his way home from golf. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, a woman who had spent decades crafting the perfect family image, now confronted with its complete collapse. For once, she seemed at a loss for words or judgment. Mother, I said quietly, I think we need to talk. All of us. She nodded slowly, moving to sit across from Ashley and me. Connor hovered nearby, and I patted the seat next to me, including him in this family moment. I never meant for any of this to happen, my mother began, her voice uncharacteristically tremulous. I just wanted what was best for both of you. I wanted you to have good lives. I know, Mom, I said, but you equated good with a very specific kind of life. And when my life took a different path, you treated it as a failure rather than just a different kind of success. She flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. I've worked hard to build a life I'm proud of, I continued. Connor and I might not have a big house or a prestigious address, but we have a loving home. We have each other, and that matters more than any of the things you've spent years making me feel bad about not having. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I thought I was motivating you to do better, to want more. By constantly comparing me to Ashley, by treating Connor as less than, because of how he came into the world. Connor shifted beside me, and I squeezed his hand reassuringly. I was wrong. My mother admitted the words clearly difficult for her. I see that now, especially after today. She turned to look at Ashley. I put so much stock in appearances that I missed what was actually happening. I bragged about Brad to everyone who would listen, and all the while, she couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We all understood the magnitude of the deception. What happens now? Ashley asked, looking between my mother and me. Now, I said firmly, we start being a real family, one that supports each other through both the good times and the bad ones, one that values honesty over appearances. I don't know if I can do this alone, Ashley whispered, touching her belly again. You're not alone, I told her. You have me. You have Mom and Dad. And contrary to what you said earlier, children can thrive with one parent who loves them completely. Connor is living proof of that. My son straightened proudly beside me, and for the first time that day, Ashley looked at him with something approaching respect. Thank you, she said softly, for telling the truth, even though it hurt. Connor nodded solemnly. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Me too, Ashley replied. But maybe it's better to know now than to keep living a lie. As the four of us sat together in the ruins of what was supposed to be a celebratory day, I felt a strange sense of hope begin to take root. The path forward wouldn't be easy for any of us, especially Ashley, but at least it would be built on truth rather than illusion. And, perhaps out of this painful revelation, a stronger, more authentic family might eventually emerge. The months following the baby shower revelation were difficult but transformative for our family. Ashley filed for divorce, immediately discovering in the process that Brad's deception went even deeper than we initially thought. Not only did he have another family, but he had been siphoning money from their joint accounts for years, presumably to support his other household. Through it all, I stayed by my sister's side. The years of judgment and comparison fell away as we rediscovered the bond we had shared as children before expectations and competition had driven us apart. I accompanied her to doctor appointments, helped her prepare the nursery, and spent hours listening as she worked through her shock and grief. My mother underwent perhaps the most surprising transformation. The collapse of her carefully constructed family narrative seemed to break something fundamental in her worldview. For the first time, she began to question the values and judgments that had guided her life for so long. I spent decades focusing on the wrong thing, she confessed to me one evening as we sat in Ashley's kitchen sorting baby clothes. All those years, I looked down on your choices, and yet you built something real and honest. You raised an amazing boy with integrity and courage. Meanwhile, I was bragging about a marriage that was nothing but a facade. You did what you thought was right. I told her, finding forgiveness easier than I had expected. We all make mistakes, Mom. What matters is that we learn from them. She reached across the peel and took my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Becca, for everything. For making you feel less than. For not seeing the incredible strength it took to make the choices you did. That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. The critical comments stopped, replaced by genuine interest in my work and Connor's activities. She began to visit our apartment regularly, no longer making subtle comments about the size or location, but instead appreciating the warmth and creativity that made it our home. Connor flourished under his grandmother's newfound attention and respect. He showed her his science projects and art portfolios, and she listened with real enthusiasm. I often caught her watching him with a mixture of pride and regret, perhaps thinking of all the years she had missed by holding him at a distance. "He's so much like you," she told me once. That same quiet determination, that sense of justice. "You've done an incredible job with him, Becca. I should have told you that years ago." As for Ashley, her journey was perhaps the most difficult. At 36, she found herself facing single motherhood, exactly the situation she had judged me for so harshly. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I don't know how you did it," she admitted one night as we assembled a crib in her newly renovated nursery. She had sold the house she'd shared with Brad, unable to live with the memories, and purchased a smaller, but still lovely home, closer to where I lived. "The thought of doing this alone terrifies me." "You won't be alone," I reminded her. "And honestly, it's both harder and easier than you imagine." Harder because there are moments when having someone to share the load would mean everything. Easier because all the decisions are yours. There's a certain freedom in that. "I always thought I needed the perfect life to be happy," she said, resting a hand on her now 8-month belly. "The husband, the house, the career. I defined myself by those external markers of success. And now," I asked, "now I'm learning that real success is about authenticity, building a life that's truly yours, not one designed to impress others." She looked at me with new understanding. "You figured that out a long time ago, didn't you?" "I had to," I smiled. "But I think we all get there in our own time, in our own way." 2 weeks later, Ashley went into labor 3 weeks early. Connor and I were the first to arrive at Carolina's Medical Center, followed closely by our parents. We gathered in the waiting room, a family united by crisis and newfound understanding. When the nurse finally came to tell us that both Ashley and her daughter were doing well, my mother burst into tears. "A granddaughter," she whispered. "Another beautiful granddaughter." I noticed her use of a small but significant acknowledgement of Connor as her first grandchild. He noticed, too, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Later, as we stood around Ashley's hospital bed, watching her cradle little Lily with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder, my mother did something that surprised us all. She gathered Connor and me into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Both of you. You've taught this old woman more than she ever expected to learn." Connor looked up at her with his wise, gentle eyes. "It's okay, Grandma. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need the most." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, marveling at my son's capacity for forgiveness and wisdom. In the weeks and months that followed, our family settled into a new normal. Ashley discovered strengths she never knew she possessed as she navigated new motherhood without the partner she had counted on. My mother became a regular fixture in both our homes, dividing her time between her grandchildren with no hint of the favoritism that had once been so painful. One evening, as I sat on my small balcony, watching Connor help Ashley manage baby Lily while she prepared a bottle, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been difficult, filled with judgment pain, and eventually revelation. But what had emerged from that crucible was something precious, a family bound not by appearances or expectations, but by love, truth, and mutual respect. I had spent so many years feeling like the family failure, the one who had strayed from the approved path. Now I understood that sometimes the unexpected path leads to exactly where you need to be. My choices had given me Connor independence and a life built on authenticity rather than illusion. The baby shower incident, painful as it was, had shattered the facade that had kept us from truly seeing and accepting each other. From those broken pieces, we had constructed something stronger, more beautiful in its imperfection. As I watch my son, today now 13 and growing into a young man of remarkable character, I'm filled with gratitude for the journey that brought us here. The road wasn't what I had planned or expected, but it led us home, nonetheless, to a place of understanding that family isn't defined by conformity to some ideal, but by the willingness to stand by each other through life's most difficult moments. Have you ever experienced a moment when a painful truth ultimately brought healing to your family? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from our most challenging circumstances.